Hello, Blazers. Welcome to episode 146 of UAB Green and Told. Original debut, Monday, March 24th, 2025. This podcast gives us a chance to share stories from members of the UAB community. Take a listen back to past episodes of UAB's most listened to podcast at alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app. And while there, leave a written review so more alums can discover us. I'm Greg Berry, a UAB alum and Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. For Luke Harlan, it was more than just a choice. It was like finding a spotlight on a stage filled with undeniable warmth and a familiarity that drew him in. As he'll share, UAB was where he was destined to take center stage.
The first time I walked in there, I really felt this kind of sense of, I don't know, use the word home. I think that's right. There was something before I even knew that's where I wanted to be. Something felt very homey about it.
With a mind that's always in overdrive, Luke constantly envisions the bigger picture. He spots stories in every scene, seeing that every element contributes to the grand narrative being told.
My brain goes big picture all the time. And I'm, especially as a storyteller, I'm kind of always thinking about how everything is telling the story and not just one part of it.
And now Luke has found a niche that ties his passion in uncovering the hidden gems of history with his work, bringing the past to life.
What I get really passionate about, there's so many overlooked and untold stories in history, particularly the last couple hundred years.
Imagine a stage set against the backdrop of the Ozark Mountains, where the echoes of history and melodies of musical theater intertwine. For Luke Harlan, that was his childhood in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Nestled in the foothills of the Ozarks is where Luke's journey began, where church and theater played pivotal roles.
I was a musical theater kid. I really loved musical theater, and that's kind of where I grew up in church, and that's kind of where a lot of my sense of storytelling started. Is a lot of what we did was like memorizing Bible stories, and my dad was a minister at the church, and so I spent a lot of my childhood kind of deeply involved in analyzing text and stories, and that's a lot of what I still do, and so that's kind of where it started. It's like that, yeah.
What kind of productions were you a part of in high school, and even maybe as a younger child growing up?
When I started performing, my first role was Tiny Tim in The Christmas Carol, and then went on to just do a bunch of I did like Oliver and The Music Man and Oklahoma, all the classic musicals at this great little theater called the Rogers Little Theater in Rogers, Arkansas. Shout out to community theaters and the amazing work that they do, because it's that's how so many kids find expression and find a way to like express themselves on stage, and it's wonderful. That's how I started. So I really loved that theater and did a lot of like fun old classic musicals.
So now I've talked to a lot of people who obviously grew up in Alabama and wound up at UAB. Your story's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Coming from Arkansas down to Alabama, what went into the decision-making process for you?
Well, it's funny. I first went to Tennessee, actually.
Okay.
I went to my first year of college in Tennessee at Vanderbilt. After my freshman year, I got cast in a show that was a touring show. And so I took a year off, basically, or was the plan, and went on tour. And then at the end of that, I didn't kind of go back to Nashville. Things were kind of just moved around quite a bit. And my sister was living in Birmingham. I decided I wanted to go and stay with her. I'd never been to Birmingham. I had no connection to Birmingham except for my sister, and stayed there for a while, really loved it, and found UAB kind of not accidentally, but I was looking to see a way to stay. I'm a theater guy. I was kind of wanting to keep doing that. And when I visited UAB's theater department specifically, I was really just, it hit it off in me. I was struck by how amazing the faculty, the facilities, the resources. I was shocked, honestly, because I didn't have any expectation to find that in Birmingham, and so I joined the department.
What was the department like? You mentioned, it was very cool, it was neat, but what was it that really, really drew you in and gave you a home?
The faculty. I think really there's I was at one shocked at how many of the faculty were not just not just great teachers, but amazing practitioners as well. And that's not common at all theater schools. Sometimes, a lot of theater school or theater departments are people who, maybe at one point were really practicing and doing it, but now only teach but I was just really excited by how many people in the faculty at UAB's theater department were making things and were really making great things. And I was also struck by, I mean, there were two different theaters that were both like just really special spaces. And it felt like the first time I walked in there, I really felt this kind of sense of, I don't know, use the word home. I think that's right. There was something before I even knew that's where I wanted to be, something felt very homey about it. And I think it's a mix of the people, the faculty, and kind of the space itself. I never saw myself sticking around in Birmingham, but then I did.
Were you on stage? Were you behind the scenes when you were doing the productions here at UAB, or what kind of roles did you fill? Maybe a little bit of everything?
I started as an actor, and
Okay.
that's what I came into the department doing. And then while I was there, started designing, and then stage managed a little bit. I was looking back on it now, I realized I was kind of searching because I wasn't fulfilled yet as an actor. And there was one visiting professor, her name's Lisa Channer, and she was the first person who kind of looked at me and said, "Have you ever tried directing?" And I hadn't really, because I just hadn't really thought about it or didn't really know if I could, something like that. But when she said that to me, I was like, well, I don't know, maybe I should try. And she was teaching a directing class, and that kind of changed my life. She and that class and that moment for me really, I mean, it made me realize I am a director. That's kind of where everything really started, because I started directing, and she was an amazing mentor and is still a dear friend of mine now.
What is it about directing that really spoke to you?
I get really interested in all the different aspects of performance and live performance, and I mean all kinds. But like an actor has to focus on themselves only, really. And a designer's focusing on a certain design, a technician is focusing on their craft. Like everyone kind of has their very specific place. And for me, I always found that I was just interested in all of it. And specifically, I'm a detail person, but I'm really like my brain goes big picture all the time. And especially as a storyteller, I'm kind of always thinking about how everything is telling the story and not just one part of it. And so directing made sense automatically, because suddenly everything that I was thinking about, which is all the different aspects of performance, are all a part of that job. You actually have to be thinking about all of those things so that you have a cohesive piece of art, And so that was kind of the first thing that attracted me, and then it was really that I do like being in control.
With that said, did you lose a little piece of you when you stopped acting?
That's a good question. I didn't completely stop. I still do when I can.
Okay.
When I moved to New York, I co-wrote and acted in a play that ended up going on for a long time, and that was a big part of myself. Yeah, so it's a really good question, because I think you're right. It does. That's true. And I kind of have to keep acting at least as a hobby, or something that I do to stay in touch with that part of myself, because I think you're right. That's important.
With all the directors that have been behind the scenes, Scorsese, Spielberg, Houston, is there one that you gravitated towards and go, you know what? I want to be like that one.
I mean, I have so many influences and inspirations, but you asked me right now because I'm reading right now. I'm reading this biography of Mike Nichols. I'm a huge Mike Nichols fan. A couple of my like favorite films are his, like the Graduate and The Birdcage, and but what I really love about Mike is first he was an actor and a comedian, and then he became a director, and then of theater, and then he moved into film, and then he started doing. So he's a big influence for me because he kind of is he shows how you can move between different mediums and positions, and but the whole time keep a very grounded sense of kind of what, like he always knew what he was doing it for, and he was a genius. I mean, he made beautiful and amazing things. And so I'm really, yeah, I would say Mike Nichols right now is on my mind.
When you were at UAB, what was the end goal? What'd you want to do with the theater degree?
My plan was always to go to New York, and then I don't know, everyone has this idea that they'll go to New York and then get on Broadway somehow. And so I think that was the goal for a long time. Then I got to New York and kind of made my community there, and worked really hard and did a lot, but and was kind of feeling like I'm ready for something. I was doing a lot of new plays, which was great, but I wasn't quite feeling like I was present in the work, like that my creative voice was always kind of being seen. So that's why I decided I wanted to go to grad school. And then I went to Yale School of Drama for grad school, and coming out of that is when things kind of really opened up. And I realized going back to your question, like I had a narrow view of what I wanted to do, which was I'll just go to New York and make it to Broadway like everyone does. But actually where I've gone and where things have led me is so much more interesting and exciting and varied than what I thought I wanted.
You mentioned that the door started to open after grad school. What happened?
To be honest, after grad school, I suddenly like couldn't find a job. It's one of those weird things where like I was working nonstop before grad school, and then I get out, and whether it's just maybe it was just the moment that it was, or like maybe there was something inside me that was bubbling. I don't know, but I kind of got out of school, and suddenly it felt like no one wanted me. Which was interesting, and it pushed me to start trying new things. And that's when I started trying film. And I'm really glad that all happened, as hard as it was, because it opened up some doors.
What was the first door that opened on a film set?
My mentor, whose name is Michael Engler, a wonderful director and producer, he asked if I wanted to assist him on a film, literally just getting him coffee and watching and helping with anything that needed to be done. And it was my first time on a film set, and that was like a huge eye-opening moment. I don't think we shot for 3 months, but it felt like a year of intensive learning about what making a film is. And I really fell in love with that medium. I never knew what filmmaking entailed, and I never knew how to get into it. So I have such gratitude to him for just giving me the opportunity. And then from that point on, I started making my own films, and I started doing stuff because I couldn't stop, and I just loved it.
When you started making your own films, what did you draw for inspiration? Because I know White Flags is on the list. There's some others. You're award winning and all that. So where are you getting that inspiration?
That film you talk about, White Flags, that was written by some friends from grad school, and that was happening in a moment. It was during the Me Too movement, when it was really kind of becoming a huge in our consciousness. And a lot of the kind of passion we had about making that film was just about trying to kind of enter into that conversation, and just really just to have the conversation. Like it's a film that's all about consent, and just about what is consent. And so when it came to inspiration for that, it's kind of, the inspiration was around just wanting to engage in conversation about a topic that was really difficult to talk about. And art, and especially I think the performing arts and film and TV is it can instigate that kind of conversation. So that's really where that kind of came from, was we wanted to kind of engage people and lean forward rather than kind of pull back, which I think a lot of people would tend to do when things are hard to talk about.
When was that moment that you said, aha, I think I made it in this industry? Because let's face it, the entertainment industry is very difficult.
I mean, I don't know if I've had that moment yet. I mean, an amazing and wonderful moment was when I got my own chair on set that had my name on it. That felt like a validation. And not just, but I think what that moment helped me understand is that my ideas and my input are valuable. Honestly, in this industry, it's hard to believe that because there's so many voices and there's so many projects and there's just so much going on that, like, to have confidence that my ideas are actually worth something, that's a hard place for anyone to get to. And for me, even going to Yale for grad school and all of that, it wasn't until really that moment on set when I kind of saw the physical representation of you belong here, that I think I was finally able to realize, oh, I can trust that my ideas are good.
I want to get into a few things that you're starting to develop, but I want to start with The Gilded Age first. This is a production that I think a lot of people probably know about. You can find it on HBO, and I'm sure on other streaming services. How did you land a job on The Gilded Age?
Well, I started there as an assistant as well, and with the same director who invited me to work on the film. And I started getting coffee again, like that's kind of how it all began. But I quickly realized on that production that there was Julian Fellows who writes it, when he wrote Downton Abbey, it was a world that he knew because he grew up in and lived in, and he didn't have to kind of have any research to help. When it comes to New York City in the 1880s, it's not a world that he knew well. He knows it well, but like it's not a world that he kind of was steeped in, and so didn't need any help with. But I kind of was one of the first ones in that room to say, hey, I think that we should do some deep research, not just research, but dramaturgy. And I think there was a sense of the show needed kind of a comprehensive framework for what we were creating, especially if we were going to go on for longer than one season, because the show is built on historical details and historical accuracy. And I was just one of the first ones who raised their hands and said, I think that we should do more of this. And we should really kind of find a way to make that a central part of making the show. And so by the time season 2 came along, that's when I got promoted to producer, is because I kind of had already, even as an assistant, started doing a lot of that work, started inserting myself a lot into the conversation about what the next season was going to be, in terms of the question of, well, what happened in 1883 in New York City? And I was the one who kind of got a team together to do that research, to figure out, well, maybe the show could go in this direction. There was an opera war happening, and these two places opened on the same night. Maybe that's actually like a framework for a season of the show. And so that's how I entered into the conversation as a kind of creator on it.
What kind of challenges does that possess when you're trying to be historically accurate? Because a lot of productions, they really don't need that, but for that show, they definitely do.
Yeah, they do, and it's become kind of one of my things I do. I really kind of work mostly now in historical fiction and kind of creating work that is based on historical moments in history and real people. And the challenge is there's so many stories, and you can get real steeped in detail in history that is not actually interesting. But in a way, it's like pulling out what is going to be exciting, relevant to a modern audience, and a lot of that is it's sifting through a lot to kind of pull out the nuggets of gold. And for me, I'm a history nerd, so I do get kind of really interested in all sorts of things, but the challenge is always to kind of keep the storytelling brain at the forefront so that you're thinking, oh, well, that's an interesting part of that character, and here's an interesting part of this other character. And then the challenge is always, sometimes you're making a real person in the show, like in the Gilded Age, there are real people, Mrs. Astor and Mr. McAllister. These characters are real people, so we actually have a duty and obligation to be accurate to that real person. And so that comes with its own challenges. But then the other part of it is creating fictional characters that are amalgamations of a lot of real people. And that's where you give and kind of take from all different places and put them together. So I find it really, really exciting to work in historical periods because I love to steep myself in it. I get really interested in the details of how we lived, and kind of not just the differences of how we live, but also the similarities, how things really in 150 years haven't changed that much.
And that history nerddom, and has that kind of led you to the Order 9066 and some of the other things that are currently in development?
Yeah, that's a script I've been working on for a while. That's about this man named Fred Korematsu, who right during World War II, he was in San Francisco during the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he became he was just a kid, just kind of a Japanese kid living in San Francisco, but then he became an activist. He was in the right place at the right time, and then was kind of pulled out by this guy from the ACLU and said, "Hey, let's take this to the Supreme Court," when it came to Japanese internment. So it's this wonderful story of a kid who was just wanting to live his life, but then became an activist and tried to make a difference. And it's a beautiful story. And so yes, like this my nerddom, as you call it, has led me to a lot of different stories that I think are important to tell. There's so many, what I get really passionate about, there's so many overlooked and untold stories in history, particularly the last couple hundred years. And particularly, for me, I kind of focus on American stories and stories of underrepresented voices, diverse stories. So this is like that one is, kind of right up my alley. And I think that these are important. It's important for us to know about the people who have been here and have been, whose shoulders we stand on. And I'm really excited about telling stories about the LGBTQIA plus community. That's a community I'm a part of, and one that I think that we should just always be learning more about, especially as it goes I'm developing a series that's about that community in the late 19th century. So there's a lot of like just stories we don't know yet. And I'm excited about them.
You mentioned a while ago that you don't feel that you've made it yet in the entertainment industry. If these projects that are currently in development make the light of day and they're seen by the masses, is that the moment for you?
I think it's easier right now to say yeah, but you never know. I think, but I feel like that's a yes to that, because these are things that I'm personally really passionate about. They're not someone else's project that I'm working on, which is wonderful, and I've done that a lot. But I think if there's a moment when something that's kind of my little passion pet project gets kind of a bigger audience, I think that'll be really cool.
That's Luke Harlan, a 2008 graduate of the College of Arts and Sciences, where he earned a degree in theater. With a passion for history, Luke intertwines the past with the stage, bringing historical narratives to life. This unique blend allows him to have his own spin on what it means to be a blazer.
The trailblazing really feels right. Like there's a sense of blazing forward and no fear, kind of and power. And I think that's what I take away from being a blazer, is a sense of being forward momentum, and like really kind of blazing a trail forward
Be sure to check out past episodes of the UAB Green and Told podcast. Listen in at alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold. Have a story to share or know someone who does? Email greenandtold@uab.edu. Finally, be sure to follow us on social media. Just search UAB Alumni on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening, and until next time, go Blazers.